Good afternoon. We're right in the middle of session for those of us who started on Tuesday, and it's right after lunch. I know we all got the groggies right now, if you're doing it right. So, if you would just indulge me, help me out a little bit here. When I say go, can we just like yell and wail for a second? Sing, scream, just something. Ready, go! Thank you. Um, so we're talking this session about the 8 awarenesses. For those who weren't here yesterday, the Buddha's last teaching before his death was the 8 awarenesses, or the 8 means to enlightenment. Kind of mirrors the Eightfold Path in a way. I was thinking about that today. The fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path to enlightenment. That was his first teaching, and now his last teaching is the 8 means to enlightenment. There's some overlap, and of course, numberless ways to enlightenment, but hopefully these are helpful. Let's see. So we talked about the first 2 awarenesses yesterday, which were freedom from greed and satisfaction. And of course, we talked about these are not rules, these are not things to do. Just go and be satisfied, and if you don't, then you're a bad Buddhist. It's not really how it works. These are awarenesses. How much am I aware of my satisfaction and dissatisfaction, my greed and my freedom from greed? So we'll just kind of move on to the third awareness, the third means to enlightenment. And of course, I'm reading from Dogen Zenji, who in 1253, as he was dying, kind of used these teachings of the Buddha as his last teachings as well, with a little bit of his own commentary. So I'm reading from Dogen's 8 awarenesses. So number 3, he says the third means is to enjoy serenity. Enjoy serenity. The third full book of koans that we do in our curriculum is called the Book of Serenity, or the Book of Equanimity. Doesn't that sound nice? And of course, same thing. You can't force serenity. You can't choose, now I'll just be serene. It won't work. It won't work. We can invite serenity. We can be aware of serenity. But yeah, please don't try to be serene. There's nothing worse than walking into a spiritual center and there's some uptight, wounded, traumatized, suffering person who's just doing with all of their might to just be serene. Welcome. Do not drink the Kool-Aid at that party. So Dogen says, enjoying serenity means to live in solitude, away from the world of suffering. That jumped out at me so hard. To be serene, to enjoy serenity, means living in solitude. This should bring up a lot of red flags for us all. Primarily because, given this is a teaching of the Buddha, and, there's a very commonly quoted story of the Buddha with his disciple Ananda, friend and maybe cousin. Is he a cousin of some sort? Yeah. And Ananda comes to the Buddha and he says, Buddha, it seems to me that spiritual friendship is like half of the spiritual life. And the Buddha says, no, Ananda, spiritual friendship is the entirety of the spiritual life. So, how do we reconcile the same guy who said the entirety of our spiritual life is Sangha, community, spiritual connection, spiritual conflict, all the things that are involved in a friendship? What does it mean then that he says um, solitude is the way to enjoy serenity? I think solitude must mean something different from being by myself. It doesn't exclude being by myself, but let's take a deeper look. So that's what Dogen says. And the Buddha, he quotes the Buddha, the Buddha's original teachings. He says, monks, those who live in solitude gain the virtues of eternal peace. Living in solitude. So trying to think about how to best talk about what he could possibly mean by solitude. And there are some good koans that really point to this. One of them being the Hermit of Lotus Flower Peak. There's a group of people that come to see him. He's obviously some kind of known spiritual hermit person. But of course, he's with people. He's engaging with people. Um, and he says, well, the first part he says, he holds up his staff and he says, when the ancients got here, why didn't they stay? And no one answered. And he says, it's because they didn't gain power on the road. And I'll talk about that with the next means, next awareness. But then he says, he asks another question, which I am forgetting at this moment. But it's something along the lines of, what did they see, or what is the way, or something like that. And no one answers. And he says, alone with my staff across my back, I enter the myriad peaks. So obviously, he's with people, he's engaging, and the myriad peaks are the myriad phenomena of our life, our family, our job, our health issues, our psychology, moment to moment. It's like I think it's a reference to Tozan's five ranks, which are the last koans we do. And they talk about the myriad peaks. Every moment, all the little bits of our life are the myriad peaks. And I really think this captures the spirit of solitude. Whether we are in a group of people, or have a partner, or don't have a partner, or live in a community, or don't live in a community, or work with people, can we just take our staff, our big self, our all-inclusive self, our open beginner's mind, and just, he says, with my staff across my back, minding no one, I enter into the myriad peaks. Another good koan that illustrates this is one we talk about a lot, from the Muman Khan, or the Gateless Gate. I think it's Zwigon. Zwigon calls master. So every day, Zwigon would wake up and say, master, and he would himself answer, yes. And then he would call master, And then he would respond, yes. And then he says something like, don't let your guard down, or, stay diligent, or something like that. And he would respond, yes, yes. And then he says, do not be deceived by others. And then he would respond, no, no. So this master, and yes, um, closing this gap between master and student, myself and other. Do not be deceived by others. Um, we can talk about that in a number of ways, but obviously the way we usually talk about it, really hard to see, but don't be deceived by this false delusion that there are other people, that there are others that are separate from you. Don't get washed away in that. We are all each other's master. We are all each other's student. The wind chimes chiming in the background is my master, and I am its. And so I think it's from this perspective, do not be deceived by others. Do not think that there are other things and other separate experience or separate entities that threaten or judge. Don't be deceived by that. And from that perspective, when we're all one, when I carry the entire universe and every being on my staff as I walk through the myriad peaks, then we are alone. Of course we're alone. There's just one, right? Kind of a cheesy but somewhat helpful way to look at it is alone, all one. Um, that's how I see this solitude. And what I notice, the deeper I get more familiar and intimate with this big, giant, all-inclusive solitude, um, I find a strength. I find a serenity. And when people insult me, when people reject me, when people tell me I'm wrong, um, it's so easy to just accept that and to see, maybe they're right. Maybe I have something to learn, or gosh, they must be really hurting if they spoke to me in such a mean way. Um, that is solitude. Seeing that we are all alone together. So the Buddha goes on, those who live in solitude gain the virtues of eternal peace. Oh, another good koan. Someone asked one of the famous masters, maybe Uman, he said, what is Buddha? And he says, sitting alone on Dayu Peak. Sitting alone on Dayu Peak. He was in Dayu Peak at the moment he said that. He was on Dayu Mountain or something like that. Surrounded by people, surrounded by his fellow Sangha members. And so what is Buddha? Seeing that we are all together in this joined solitude. Nothing separate that can threaten or harm me. So then the Buddha says, a quiet person is respected by both Indra and all the celestial beings. What a nice way to talk about that, a quiet person. Um, I don't think it's so ironic that he's talking here. Um, quiet. What does it mean to be quiet? It reminds me of koan with Joshu, where someone says, "What is Buddha?" And Joshu says, "An appropriate statement." That kind of goes along with this. Being quiet has nothing to do with not talking. Of course, as we know right now in sesshin, that's a powerful practice. Being quiet has everything to do with being appropriate, not making noise. Oh man, I suffered so much throughout my life from like this compulsion to make noise, be seen, prove what I know, prove what I've done, all that stuff. Just be quiet. And when it's appropriate for you to give an hour-long speech, do that. That's quiet. And you'll be respected by Indra, who I guess is a Hindu god, some kind of Indo region deity. Um, and that's kind of nice. I like that, right? I've made so much noise in my life trying to get respect and admiration from like people who I think are separate from me, approve me. But if I can instead um, prioritize the respect of the unknown, the invisible, without getting anything in return, right? Indra's respect doesn't get me applause or money or love or anything like that, maybe big love. But what a beautiful thing to just allow yourself to be quiet and respected by who knows. So yeah, a quiet person breaks free from attachment to himself or themselves. And in this way, they sever the root of suffering. I don't want to talk too much more about it, but just really look at how is he saying that solitude will break my attachment from myself? I think the koans we talked about really exemplify that. To truly be strong and confident in my big self that includes everything, by definition, just naturally allows our small self to just drop off. Those who live with others will be hindered by them, just as a tree withers when any birds perch on it. Same thing, be really careful, right? Living with others. Um, what is he saying there, right? He's saying what Zwigon said, don't be deceived by others. There's no such thing, ultimately. A person attached to worldly desires is similar to an old elephant entrenched in mud. Both are unable to free themselves, and both will finally be destroyed. This is the meaning of a solitary life. So yeah, when I truly embody big solitude, and I see that I encompass and include everything, then there's nothing else to want. You just simply can't want anything else. You have everything. There's no worldly desire to attach to. The fourth awareness is diligence. Yeah, so we have freedom from greed, satisfaction, enjoying the serenity of big solitude, not being deceived by others. And now we have diligence. And Dogen says that is to say, constant striving to do good, to do good. And that might be a reference to what we call in Zen the three pure precepts, I know there's a lot of like 8 this and 3 that, and the treasures and the tenets and the awarenesses and the path and the. But this one is the 3 pure precepts. Don't do evil or refrain from doing evil. Do good and do good for others. So this, Dogen says, the 4th means is diligence, which is to say constant striving to do good. And of course, all of us growing up in our Judeo-Christian culture, we think of doing good as like charity and helping someone across the street and sacrificing for the benefit of others. And that's kind of what we mean when we say do good for others, the 3rd pure precept. But this precept of do good, we typically think of as stop separating. Stop, not stop, but invite and open up to the possibility that everything is just this one. Did you feel it when we were yelling and wailing together? I fucking did. Absolutely. Um, so yeah, striving, constant striving. We're all just waiting for Sunday to get the fuck out of here. And here he's saying constant striving to open up to oneness. And the Buddha said, monks, be diligent in your practice, for this will hasten realization of truth. For this reason, you should be diligent. So I said I would talk about the rest of the hermit koan for this awareness. And so the hermit starts by saying, what do you say? When the ancients got here, why didn't they stay? And then he answers, because they did not gain power on the road. So when he says here, right, he's holding up his staff, which in a lot of these koans is kind of like a presentation of like enlightenment is just this. He's also the hermit of Lotus Flower Peak, which, you know, when they got here, the peak, the ultimate enlightenment. So when the ancient sages and Buddhas, when they became enlightened, when they opened up to the oneness, when they saw their true nature, why didn't they stay? Why didn't they just stay there? And then he answers, they did not gain any power on the road. And this is, I think, what Dogen and Buddha are saying. There's no answer. There's no, aha, got it now. Even when the Buddha looked up and saw the morning star and started the ripple of Buddhism throughout, you know, for the last 2,500 years, he did not stop striving. And he did not stop suffering, or at least experiencing suffering, circumstances. Constant practice. They didn't stay here because there's nowhere to stay. There's no power to gain. There's nothing to gain. Your life as it is perfect Buddhahood. Very difficult to see that. And we get little glimpses. Maybe even we spend a whole session just blissed out in absolute samadhi and emptiness, and we just feel one with everything. Try holding on to that. Let me know how that goes. Or as Ram Dass says, go hang out with your family after that and see how long your bliss hangs around. Yeah, it's no power. You're not going to get anything. Man, sucks. But it's also beautiful. So that's why we have to be diligent. Another nice koan. So how do we be diligent? A lot of people, we talk about it in interview, And then even other sanghas, people say like, how do I like I'm having a real hard time being consistent with my practice? How do I do this diligence when I'm busy, when I'm annoyed, when meditation doesn't really seem to be doing anything for me, when my back hurts? Like, how am I supposed to just be diligent? Okay, sounds good. How do we do that? Um, I don't know that I have any helpful answer for you there, but I do have another koan, or at least the start of a koan that kind of helps me. It features Ungan and I think Kyoho, could be someone else, but two monks, and one of them is sweeping the porch at the temple, and the other one comes up and he says, "You're hard at it," and the other monk says, um, "You should know there is one who is not hard at it." And then they kind of go back and forth in kind of a more Dharma combat, which we don't really have to go into right now. But hard at it, right? So is he talking about the sweeping? Or is he encouraging him? Like, man, like you have such a diligent practice. You're hard at it. Good for you. And then he says, you should know, they say, you should know that there is one who is not hard at it. And we see a lot of koans like this. Why does the barbarian have no beard? How do you lift me up using no hands? The Heart Sutra talks about no eye, no ear, no nose, tongue, body, mind, no color, no phenomena, right? So really pointing to this selfless, non-separate, totally whole oneness, where there's no, it's not me being diligent. I'm just simply sweeping. I'm just simply doing sesshin. And it's hard to talk about, but it's that difference between like, I need to be diligent and just simply doing the schedule. No sense of doing anything in particular. No goal. That's why the word striving is kind of tricky here. The effortless striving. So I don't know if that helps at all, but if you can see this diligence as just simply what I'm doing, it's not a means to an end. It's not even a means. It's just back to the earth. Not thinking about why, not thinking about I'm doing it more than this person or that person does it more than me. Am I being diligent enough? All of that, just take it out because ultimately there is no one who is hard at it. The Buddha says, a trickle of water, if consistent, wears away rock. Practice of the way, if consistent, wears away the obstacles to enlightenment. I think that's pretty straightforward. I will just encourage you all to invite the fact that also there is no rock and there is no obstacle. Both are true. And then he finishes, intermittent rubbing together of wood will not produce fire. Likewise, interrupted practice will not produce enlightenment. This is the meaning of diligence. Is anyone else like racked with guilt on hearing that? Interrupted practice will not produce enlightenment. It's so hard to talk about. Even the Buddha is fucking up here. Produce enlightenment. Get out of here. Ridiculous. But it's also helpful. Also really helpful to talk in those terms, right? His first words upon enlightenment were, wonder of wonders, all beings are the wisdom and compassion of the Tathagata. That's what we are. There's nothing to produce. There's nowhere to get. There's no power to gain on the road. And yet, we can see it. All of us are seeing it firsthand for ourselves. If you sit real hard, things shift. Concentration deepens. Samadhi gets clearer. We get more intimate with ourselves. It's true. It happens. Um, and so, look, I mean, uh, diligent practice, uninterrupted practice. Uh, None of us are sitting a full monastery schedule, right? There are probably thousands of people in this world who sit 5 to 7 hours a day, every day. None of us are doing that. During Ango, we do, but so are we? Is that interrupted practice? Are we producing less enlightenment? A lot of us here sit way less than that. Um, so, I mean, look, I believe in Zazen, um, but I also believe that there are numberless practices. And so I think this diligence for us, and this is from the Buddha and Dogen who really did throw away everything to just be in the woods with their people meditating all day, or in a monastery meditating all day, every day. I remember hearing a story where I think one of Dogen's students, his mom was on her deathbed. And he said, Dogen, master, can I please go visit my mom on her deathbed? And Dogen said something like, I guess if you don't care about the Buddha way, I mean, guilted this guy into, it's just another different path than I've been handed down, at least through Seisin. That's not really how we see it, but it sure is diligent. Um, but hey, taking care of your folks, that's a diligent practice for sure. Eating well, maintaining a healthy work-life balance, making boundaries, healthy boundaries, especially when we like want something so bad. Very diligent practice, or a difficult practice that we have to be diligent about. So yeah, uninterrupted, diligent zazen, super powerful, and I highly recommend it. I haven't experienced any better way to really, really viscerally feel the dropping off of body and mind. Um, but own your path, own your karma, and whatever your practice is, whether it's some zazen here and there, or writing articles for other people, or volunteering, or whatever, all the different practices, just be diligent and remember that there is one who is not hard at it. But for us now, while we're here, um, I hope the Buddha's words are inspiring you as much as they are inspiring me to really look at greed, satisfaction, solitude, my reliance on others, and diligence. Totally thankless, rewardless diligence. And yeah, I hope that propels you into the rest of our sitting together.